Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 3 of the Monday Q&A, so let's get to the first question. What is your take on the discussion about whole grains versus refined grains? On the one hand, whole grains provide more micronutrients. Therefore, I always advocate unprocessed food. On the other hand, people claim that the greater micronutrient content is kind of worthless because of so-called anti-nutrients. Those anti-nutrients, such as phytic acid, inhibit the proper absorption of several nutrients. Alright guys, a lot of this anti-nutrient thing has been blown out of the water by people trying to push paleo movement, people who are anti-grain, anti-carb. It isn't as serious as it's been made out to be. Go do your own digging, try to find unbiased data on it, and look at the general consensus, and you're going to find this isn't really as big of a deal as they would like for you to believe it is. Now, as far as the thing of whole versus refined grains, it comes down to what are your carb needs. If you're someone who literally needs 600 to 800 grams of carbs a day, you might find it difficult. I don't find it difficult to get that even from whole grains, but a lot of people do due to the fiber content and the bulk of the food. So they might need some heavily refined grains in there to hit their numbers, some white pasta and whatever. Now, I personally like white rice because I don't like the taste of brown rice. It's a hassle to cook. White rice is good in my rice cooker, but when I eat white rice, I tend to load gigantic piles of veggies on top of it. So I still end up with a very balanced profile, but white rice still doesn't lose that many nutrients over, say, brown rice if you check it. But as far as most of my grains go, unless I'm going to do something like a refeed, I tend to eat, as far as my other grains, I tend to eat whole grains only. Oftentimes organic grains, just because I can get them at a good price, things like organic whole wheat pasta, stuff like that. And it's because of the higher fiber content, the higher micronutrients in general. You're just getting better overall nutrition. So unless it's a case of you just can't stand brown rice, so you do the white rice instead, and because of convenience, and just balance it back out with lots of veggies. For the most part, you generally want to lean towards whole grains unless you just have such a massive caloric load due to your metabolism and TDEE that you just really can't squeeze in the food that you actually need to meet your energy needs. So it really comes down to what do you need as an individual, but for the most part, I do lean more in the direction of whole grains just for the fiber content, if nothing else. All right, next question. How should a strength athlete incorporate static stretching considering studies show it decreases performance? Is it just as simple as don't do it? Static stretching only decreases performance when you perform it shortly before you train. It's perfectly fine afterwards. It doesn't decrease performance then unless you're going to train again in an hour. And I would say the majority of us who are strength athletes aren't doing that. Unless you're training on the Bulgarian system to where you're squatting 3 times a day, 6 days a week in 3 different sessions, then this is not a big deal. Just stretch after you train. Now, the benefits of the static stretching are subject to debate themselves. I do a bit myself anyways, even though there is not the best evidence in the world that is particularly beneficial. I just feel like it helps me recover a little better. It can get rid of some cramps and things like my hamstrings, which are a muscle that cramp up a lot for me after doing heavy pulling. But in general, the negatives to static stretching really only apply if done before training. Afterwards, perfectly fine. If you do need to do some stretching before, stick with more dynamic type stretching. All right, next question. Is doing a sport like kickboxing, football, MMA enough to maintain muscle mass if you're in a caloric maintenance or surplus, or does one absolutely need to lift weights to maintain or build muscle mass? Depends on where you are. All right, you take someone who is at my size and strength level. If I had nothing but body weight movements and football, kickboxing, MMA to build muscle, I would lose muscle and strength relatively quickly. An untrained individual could start doing MMA and they'll start gaining muscle. They'll gain muscle. They might gain muscle as fast as they would weightlifting for the first couple of months, but what will happen is after about 2 months of doing all the basic exercises they have you do in martial arts, because anyone who's done martial arts knows that in any martial arts class they have you doing exercises and conditioning work as part of it. I was doing this at 7 years old. I mean, we had to do all these push-ups on our knuckles and all that stuff when I was taking martial arts as a little kid. So it's just considered part of it, and you're going to gain muscle from that. But when you get to a point to where you can do 20 or 30 push-ups, you're not going to gain muscle from it anymore till you go to one-arm push-ups. And so, in the same with all the running and the movements and everything, they can build muscle if you have virtually none. But they will very quickly hit a wall because you have no way to really use progressive overload beyond that. And so if you have built enough muscle through weightlifting to where you're now at a level of workload higher than you can get from these sports, and you drop down to just doing these sports and no lifting, then obviously your muscle mass and your strength are going to regress. So it's a question of where are you at. Anything that has progressive overload and resistance will build muscle and strength as long as it takes you to a higher workload or resistance than you currently have been using. So it's very relative. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.